Seriously? You can't even pour water without making a mess? The woman in the designer blazer didn't bother to lower her voice, her perfectly manicured hand gesturing dismissively. This is exactly why people like you stay exactly where you are in life. The cruelty of those words hung in the air, sharp and poisonous. Sarah's fingers curled around a piece of glass too tightly, a small cut opening on her index finger, adding physical pain to the emotional wounds being inflicted so carelessly. She didn't notice the blood at first, too focused on keeping her composure in front of the Thursday night dinner crowd. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the uncomfortable silence that had fallen across the normally bustling establishment. "I'll bring fresh water and clean this right away." The table of four, two couples dressed in clothes that cost more than Sarah earned in a month, exchanged glances of smug superiority. They had been impossible from the moment they walked in, demanding a specific booth already occupied by other customers, complaining about the temperature, the lighting, the menu options. Nothing had satisfied them, and Sarah, despite her 15 years of experience navigating difficult customers, had become their chosen target. "Don't bother," said the man with the expensive watch, loud enough for neighboring tables to hear. "We've been here for nearly an hour, and everything has been absolutely disappointing. The food is mediocre at best, the service is abysmal, and now we're sitting in a puddle." He made a show of dabbing his completely dry sleeve with a napkin. Sarah felt a hot flush of shame creep up her neck as she registered the stares from other diners, some sympathetic, others simply uncomfortable, most just grateful not to be the focus of such pointed cruelty. In the 15 years she'd worked at Rosie's, she'd never experienced such deliberate unkindness. Usually, the diner was filled with regulars who knew her by name, asked about her kids, and understood that the occasional wait or mix-up was part of life in a small-town establishment with a staff that was more family than employees. What these customers couldn't see, what they wouldn't care to know, was that Sarah had been at the hospital until 3 a.m. the night before with her youngest, who had an asthma attack. That she'd given her last $20 to the babysitter who stayed overtime. That the apartment complex where she lived had raised the rent again, and she was behind on utilities. That despite it all, she had shown up today with a smile, determined to provide the same warm service she prided herself on. "I'd like to speak to your manager," the second woman announced, her tone suggesting she was delivering Sarah's execution order rather than making a simple request. This level of incompetence deserves to be addressed properly. Sarah nodded, feeling the first tear escape despite her best efforts. She quickly wiped it away, but not before several nearby customers noticed. An elderly couple at the next table exchanged concerned glances. A young family with 2 small children fell silent, the parents using the moment as an unplanned lesson in how not to treat others. "Of course," Sarah managed, rising to her feet with the broken glass carefully gathered in a cloth napkin. "I'll get Frank right away." As she turned to walk away, the man with the watch added loudly, "And don't expect much of a tip. Service like this doesn't deserve rewards." That was the moment Sarah's composure finally shattered completely. A single sob escaped her lips before she could trap it behind clenched teeth. 15 years of professional poise crumbled under the weight of exhaustion, worry, and undeserved humiliation. A tear slid down her cheek, then another, and another, silent but unmistakable evidence of her broken spirit. The restaurant had fallen uncomfortably quiet. The clink of silverware ceased. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Even the sounds from the kitchen seemed muted, as if the entire establishment held its collective breath. In the corner booth, partially hidden by the vintage jukebox that had been Rosie's pride since the diner opened in 1962, sat a man most of the regular patrons recognized but respectfully left alone. Marcus Chun, whose face had appeared on the regional business magazine just last month after he sold his cybersecurity startup for a figure with more zeros than most people would see in a lifetime, closed the leather-bound notebook he'd been writing in for the past hour. Marcus was a regular at Rosie's, though few understood why a man worth millions chose to frequent a simple diner on the edge of town rather than the upscale restaurants downtown. But Sarah knew. She'd been serving him black coffee and the Tuesday special for nearly 3 years now. He came for the normalcy, the lack of pretension, the fact that no one treated him differently because of his bank account. He came because places like Rosie's, with their chipped mugs and authentic connections, were increasingly rare in a world obsessed with status and appearance. He'd been quietly observing the situation unfold, his expression darkening with each cruel comment thrown Sarah's way. When she broke down, something shifted in his posture. The reserved, almost shy businessman who usually kept to himself straightened his shoulders and stood up. Frank, the manager and owner of Rosie's, emerged from the back office just as Sarah reached the service station, her hands still shaking as she set down the broken glass. He was a kind man in his 60s who had inherited the diner from his mother, the original Rosie, and treated every employee like family. "Sarah? What's wrong?" he asked, immediately concerned by her tears. "Table 12, she whispered, trying to regain her composure. "They want to speak with you." "I'm sorry, Frank. I tried to." "You don't apologize," Frank interrupted gently, his weathered face creasing with concern. "I saw how they've been treating you. Not your fault some people forget their manners when they walk through a door." As Frank turned to address the situation, he was surprised to find Marcus Chin already standing beside table 12, his presence commanding despite his simple jeans and button-down shirt. There was nothing outwardly intimidating about Marcus, of average height and build, with kind eyes behind simple glasses, but something in his calm, deliberate stance made the four customers shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice quiet but carrying across the now-silent restaurant. "I couldn't help but notice your interaction with Sarah." The man with the expensive watch looked Marcus up and down, clearly unimpressed by his casual appearance. "And you are?" "Just another customer," Marcus replied evenly. "One who's been coming here for years because of the exceptional service people like Sarah provide day after day." "Well, our experience has been quite different," the woman in the blazer said defensively, her chin lifting slightly. "And I don't see how it's any of your business." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering her words carefully. "You're right that your dining experience isn't my business. But basic human decency? That's everyone's business." The second man at the table scoffed. "Look, we pay good money when we go out, and we expect certain standards. If someone can't handle criticism in the service industry, maybe they should find another line of work." A muscle tightened in Marcus's jaw, but his voice remained calm. "What you've been offering isn't criticism. It's cruelty. And there's a significant difference." By now, every person in the restaurant was watching the exchange. The kitchen staff had emerged from behind the swinging doors, standing protectively near Sarah, who was trying desperately to compose herself, embarrassed to be the center of such attention. The four customers at table 12 stared at Marcus, with a mixture of indignation and surprise. People rarely challenged their behavior, especially in public settings where social discomfort typically ensured silence from bystanders. The woman in the designer blazer recovered first, her lips curling into a dismissive smile. "And who exactly are you to lecture us on how to behave?" she asked, voice dripping with condescension. "The etiquette police?" Marcus Chun remained perfectly still, his presence somehow growing more substantial despite his unassuming appearance. What the rude customers couldn't know was that before building his tech empire, Marcus had spent 3 years waiting tables to put himself through college. He knew firsthand the unique humiliation of being treated as less than human by people who viewed service workers as beneath them. "My name is Marcus Chen," he said simply, offering no further explanation of his identity or worth. Those who recognized him shifted in their seats, but Marcus had never been one to use his success as a weapon. The man with the expensive watch suddenly straightened, recognition flickering across his face.
"Chun?
The cybersecurity guy? Didn't your company just sell for?" "That's not relevant to this conversation," Marcus interrupted quietly. "What's relevant is that I watched you deliberately reduce another human being to tears for sport, and I can't sit by and let that happen." Frank, the manager, stepped forward now, placing a protective hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Perhaps it would be best if you folks paid your bill and moved on with your evening," he suggested to the table, his normally jovial face uncharacteristically stern. "We haven't even finished our meal," protested the second woman, though her confidence was clearly wavering under the collective disapproval now radiating throughout the restaurant. "I believe you mentioned everything was disappointing," Marcus reminded them. "Mediocre at best, I think were your exact words. Why prolong your suffering?" The tension in the air was palpable. Other diners had abandoned any pretense of not watching the confrontation. An older couple who were Rosie's diner regulars nodded in approval at Marcus's intervention. A table of young nurses still in scrubs from the hospital down the street whispered among themselves, one wiping away a sympathetic tear. The man with the watch pushed back his chair abruptly. "This is ridiculous. We're paying customers. You can't just—" "Actually," Frank interjected, finding his voice strengthened by Marcus's example, "I can. This is my establishment, and while I've always prided myself on welcoming everyone, I draw the line at cruelty to my staff. Your bill has been taken care of." He glanced at Marcus, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. "And I'd appreciate it if you'd leave now." The four customers seemed genuinely shocked at this turn of events. They had clearly expected their complaints to result in apologies, free desserts, perhaps even Sarah's reprimand. Instead, they were being asked to leave by the owner himself, backed by a millionaire and the silent support of every other patron in the restaurant. "Fine," the first man said, standing and gathering his coat. "But you can be sure we'll be sharing our experience online. Places like this don't survive bad reviews." It was then that Marcus did something unexpected. He smiled, not the condescending smirk the customers had employed, but a genuine, almost sympathetic expression. "Before you do that," he said, pulling out his phone, "I should mention that I've been recording the last few minutes of our interaction, with the audio picking up your earlier comments quite clearly." This wasn't true, but the sudden paleness of all four faces suggested they weren't certain enough of the legality to call his bluff. "I have quite a substantial following online. I wonder how your employers would feel about seeing how you behave when you think there are no consequences." The threat was delivered so gently it took a moment to register. When it did, the four exchanged alarmed glances. The second man cleared his throat. "That won't be necessary," he muttered. "We're leaving." As they filed out, the restaurant remained silent, the bell above the door tinkling with jarring cheerfulness as it closed behind them. Once they were gone, a collective exhalation seemed to pass through the space, followed immediately by a spontaneous burst of applause. Marcus looked genuinely embarrassed by the reaction, quickly raising his hands to quiet the room. "Please, this isn't about me." He turned to Sarah, who stood frozen beside Frank, her tear-stained face a mixture of gratitude and mortification. "I'm so sorry you experienced that," Marcus said, his voice pitched low now, meant just for her. "No one deserves to be treated that way, especially someone who works as hard as you do." Sarah wiped hastily at her cheeks. "Thank you, but I'm embarrassed you had to step in. I usually handle difficult customers better. It's been a long day and—" "You have nothing to apologize for," Marcus insisted gently. "Nothing at all." Frank squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "Why don't you take a break? 15 minutes in the back. Maggie can cover your tables." But Sarah straightened her shoulders, a flicker of her usual resilience returning. "No, I'm okay. Really. I'd rather keep working." There was dignity in her voice now, the dignity Marcus's intervention had helped restore. As Sarah moved to check on her other tables, many customers reached out to touch her arm or offer an encouraging word. The elderly couple pressed a folded bill into her hand despite being at another server's table. The family with small children had drawn her a hasty picture on a napkin, childish stick figures with the words, "Best Waitress," scrawled in crayon. Marcus returned to his corner booth, declining the many offers to join other tables, his preference for privacy reasserting itself now that the situation had been resolved. He reopened his notebook, but found himself watching the remarkable transformation occurring throughout the restaurant. What had been a room full of disconnected individuals, each table its own island, had somehow become a community in the span of a few minutes. Customers were introducing themselves to neighboring tables. The kitchen staff emerged with a round of complimentary desserts for everyone. Frank moved from table to table, thanking people for their support with the ease of someone who understood that a restaurant could be more than just a place to eat. It could be a cornerstone of human connection. As the evening progressed, Marcus observed as Sarah regained her confidence with each positive interaction. Her smile, tentative at first, gradually returned to its full warmth. When she approached his table to refill his coffee, there was a new respect in her eyes. "I never properly thanked you," she said quietly, the coffee pot steady in her now calm hands. "You don't need to thank me," Marcus replied. "I only did what anyone should have done."
"But they didn't," Sarah pointed out.
"You did." Marcus considered this. "Maybe next time they will. Sometimes people just need to see it's possible to speak up." As Sarah turned to go, Marcus reached into his wallet and removed a business card, turning it over to write something on the back before holding it out to her. "I know your shift ends at 9, he said. "Before you go, I'd like to talk to you about something, if you have a moment." Sarah took the card, glancing at the handwritten note on the back with a puzzled expression before tucking it into her apron pocket. "Of course. I'll find you before I leave." As she walked away, Marcus returned to his notebook, making a few quick calculations before closing it decisively. What had begun as a simple evening at his favorite diner had evolved into something more significant. The rudeness that had reduced Sarah to tears had revealed an opportunity, not just to stand up against a single instance of cruelty, but perhaps to create something with a more lasting impact. The remainder of the evening passed with a renewed sense of warmth throughout Rosie's diner. What had been a typical Thursday night had transformed into something extraordinary, a shared experience that left everyone feeling more connected. As closing time approached, the last few customers lingered, reluctant to break the spell that had fallen over the establishment. Even the kitchen staff, usually eager to begin cleanup after a long day, moved unhurriedly through their closing routines, the earlier tension replaced by animated conversation and occasional laughter. Sarah worked through the rest of her shift with restored dignity, her earlier tears now a fading memory. The kindness shown by Marcus and the other patrons had created a protective bubble around her, each small interaction helping to heal the wounds inflicted by the rude customers. When she delivered the check to a young couple celebrating their anniversary, they surprised her with a handwritten note praising her service and a tip that made her eyes widen. "We were here for the whole thing," the woman explained quietly. "What happened to you wasn't right, but how everyone responded, it restored my faith in humanity a little bit." By 9 o'clock, only Marcus remained, still occupying his corner booth, now surrounded by paperwork he'd produced from his leather messenger bag. As Sarah approached to deliver his check, she noticed the intensity with which he studied what appeared to be financial documents. "I'm not rushing you," she said quickly, "but I wanted to let you know I'm finishing up my shift, as you mentioned wanting to speak with me." Marcus looked up, his thoughtful expression warming into a smile. "Yes, thank you. Would you mind joining me for a few minutes?" Sarah hesitated, her coat already half on. "I should get home to check on my daughter." The sitter texted that her fever's down, but, "Of course, I understand completely. This won't take long, I promise." With a small nod, Sarah slid into the booth across from him, trying not to fidget nervously. Despite his kindness earlier, there was something intimidating about sitting across from someone whose success was legendary in their small town. Marcus Chen was the local boy who'd made it big, who'd built something from nothing and changed the technology landscape in the process. Yet he still came to Rosie's every week, still ordered the same black coffee and turkey club, still left generous but not flashy tips. "First," Marcus began, carefully organizing his papers, "I want to make sure you're truly okay after what happened tonight." The genuine concern in his voice caught Sarah off guard. Most people didn't ask service workers how they really felt. They saw the professional smile and assumed everything was fine. "I'm better now," she answered honestly. It was humiliating in the moment, but she gestured vaguely around the now empty diner. Seeing how everyone responded kind of erased that feeling. Like for every person who wants to tear someone down, there are more who want to build them up. Marcus nodded, pleased with her perspective. "That's exactly what I was thinking about for the last few hours. That ripple effect of kindness, how one small action can inspire others to act similarly." He slid a document across the table. Sarah glanced down, confusion creasing her brow as she tried to make sense of the legal language and numbers. "What is this?" An opportunity, Marcus replied, his voice calm but underlined with excitement. For the past year, I've been looking for meaningful ways to reinvest in this community, the one that supported me long before anyone knew my name. I've been watching how Frank struggles to keep this place going despite rising costs and competition from chain restaurants. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. It was true that Rosie's had been facing difficulties. Frank never complained openly, but the staff had noticed the increasing frequency with which he studied the books with a furrowed brow, the careful rationing of supplies, the postponed repairs. What happened tonight crystallized something I've been considering for months, Marcus continued. This place, he gestured around the diner with its worn vinyl booths and vintage decor. It's more than just a restaurant. It's a community hub. A place where a tired single mother can be defended by strangers. Where people still look each other in the eye and remember your order from last week. Sarah nodded, throat suddenly tight with emotion. Rosie's had been her second home for 15 years, the staff and regulars a kind of extended family. I'm proposing a partnership with Frank, Marcus explained, tapping the document. An investment that would allow for necessary upgrades and expansions, but with the explicit understanding that the heart and soul of this place remains unchanged. Frank would maintain operational control. I have no interest in running a diner. He smiled slightly. But I do have an interest in preserving spaces that bring out the best in people. That's incredibly generous, Sarah managed, genuinely moved. Frank will be overwhelmed. Actually, Marcus said, looking slightly embarrassed, I already discussed it with him while you were serving your other tables. He's on board, pending one condition. What's that? You. Sarah blinked in confusion. Me? Marcus nodded. Part of my proposal includes the creation of a management position, someone to handle day-to-day operations while Frank focuses on the bigger picture and finally takes some time off. He hasn't had a vacation in 12 years, did you know that? I did, Sarah said softly. We've all tried to convince him, but he's worried everything will fall apart if he's not here every day. He suggested you for the position without hesitation. Said you know this place better than anyone, have the respect of the staff, and his words, possess the perfect blend of kindness and backbone required to run a good diner. Sarah sat back, genuinely stunned. I don't know what to say. The position comes with a significant salary increase, full benefits, and most importantly for your situation, consistent hours. Marcus's voice gentled. Frank mentioned your childcare challenges, especially with your daughter's asthma. This role would give you the stability and flexibility to be there for your children while building something meaningful for yourself. Tears welled in Sarah's eyes for the second time that night, but these were entirely different from the earlier ones. These were tears of disbelief, of possibility, of doors suddenly opening where there had only been walls before. Why, she finally managed to ask, why would you do this for the diner, for Frank, for me? You barely know me. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his gaze drifting to the window where the diner's neon sign cast a warm glow on the parking lot. Do you know why I come here every week? He finally asked. Why I choose Rosie's over any of the high-end restaurants that would happily reserve their best table for me? Sarah shook her head. Because success, real success, isn't about escaping places like this. It's about remembering what they teach us. He looked back at her. 3 years ago, when my company went public and everything changed overnight, I came here in a daze. I sat in this exact booth, overwhelmed by what had happened, terrified of losing myself in the process. He smiled at the memory. You served me coffee. I was so distracted I spilled it everywhere, and instead of being irritated, you just laughed and said, looks like one of us is having an interesting day. Sarah vaguely remembered the incident, though she'd had no idea of its significance. You treated me exactly the same after my face was in the business section as you had before, like a regular person having a regular day who deserved a moment of regular kindness. That grounded me during a time when everything else was spinning out of control. His expression turned serious. So when I saw those people treating you as if you were somehow less valuable because of your job, it felt personal. Frank emerged from the back office, coat on and keys in hand, pausing when he saw them deep in conversation. All good? He asked, his weathered face revealing his hope. Sarah looked from Frank to Marcus, then back to the document before her. The contract that represented not just a job offer, but a complete rewriting of her possibilities. A chance to provide better for her children without sacrificing time with them. An opportunity to help preserve a place that mattered deeply to her and to their community. Yes, she said finally, a smile blooming across her face. All good. As they left the diner that night, the three of them walking out together under a canopy of stars, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on how completely the evening had transformed from its terrible beginning. The cruel words that had reduced her to tears now seemed distant and powerless compared to what had followed. The unexpected defense, the community that had rallied around her, and now this incredible opportunity that had emerged from the ashes of humiliation. Word of what happened at Rosie's diner that Thursday night spread quickly throughout the small town. The story shifted slightly with each retelling, as stories do, but its essence remained the same: how cruelty had been overcome by courage, how one person standing up had inspired others to do the same, and how a moment that began with tears had ended with transformation. In the weeks that followed, Frank took his first vacation in over a decade, a 2-week fishing trip he'd been dreaming about for years. Sarah stepped confidently into her new role, her natural leadership abilities flourishing with proper support and recognition. The diner underwent subtle renovations, necessary updates that preserved its nostalgic charm while making it more comfortable and efficient. And the millionaire from the corner booth? He continued to come in weekly for his black coffee and turkey club, declining the many interview requests from local media about his investment. When asked why he chose to remain so low-key about his generosity, Marcus would simply smile and say, "The story was never about me. It was about what happens when we recognize each other's humanity, even across a diner counter, even on our worst days." The true ripple effect of that night extended far beyond Rosie's diner. Customers who had witnessed the confrontation found themselves more likely to speak up when they observed injustice in other settings. The young family made a point of teaching their children to thank service workers by name. The nurses created a kindness fund at the hospital to help colleagues facing unexpected hardships. And Sarah? She hung a small framed sign in her new office, visible only to her, containing the words Marcus had written on the back of his business card that pivotal night. Sometimes the most powerful response to cruelty is not just kindness, but opportunity. Both change lives. In a world that often celebrates wealth and status above all else, the millionaire in the corner booth had reminded everyone of a simple truth: our worth is not measured by our bank accounts or job titles, but by how we treat others when it costs us something to be kind. His money had certainly made the diner's transformation possible, but it was his willingness to stand up when it would have been easier to stay seated that had truly shocked everyone and changed everything.